Right, there's quite a few people connected, and I think most of the people, everybody involved in the topics on the agenda. So let's get started. Welcome everybody to the July 29th SIG Multicluster call. And so in this scrub this week, before we get to topics, Arthur's got a couple of PRs to discuss.
Yeah, thanks. So, well, I think the first one I put on the agenda.
Yeah, just as a reminder.
Yeah, just a reminder about the service import condition, because I think everyone agreed, but now people must actually add some logo to me. I saw one of your comments, by the way, and I fixed it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's about it for that. For the other thing, I sent a message on Slack. I don't know if you all seen it, but about our conversation last week about changing service export status condition type. So there was a few people here that disagree on changing it at all on the topic. And my point was that we are doing this other change to the service import API possibly, and this would be like much harder for like every implementation. So maybe let's start with that, and if we do change something, maybe it would be other options. Well, not facilitate, but it would be like another point for possibly doing it, or at least considering it.
Yeah, if we're breaking one thing, we might as well break lots. But yeah. So I'll stop you there though, because so the purpose of the scrub is just to go through things fairly quickly, and this is a fairly big discussion, I think. So there have only been 2 responses to the Slack thread as far, the last time I checked. So I invite people to go and look at the Slack thread and follow up there, because we do have a number of guests today with topics. So for the sake of time, let's continue the discussion there on Slack and in a future call, perhaps. I hope you don't mind, Arthur.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I think or we can just reuse the same issue to like give each project opinions. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. So that's the scrub topics. And Rob, you're first up.
Okay, thank you. I've mostly been talking about this in gateway inference extension community, but because it very much relates to SIG Multicluster, I figured it would be useful to talk about it here too. As a really brief high-level refresher, I can go deeper, but Gateway Inference Extension exists as an extension to Gateway API that is focused on routing efficiently to inference-focused backends such as LLMs. What we found from fairly consistent feedback is that it's pretty difficult for people to find all the GPUs they want or need in a single place or in a single cluster. And so they'd really love to be able to route across more than one cluster. So this is, multi-cluster routing, but driven by a different, user story, where instead of HA, this is primarily about just getting the resources that wherever they happen to be. And so one of the things that is unique about Gateway Inference Extension is it's adding a different kind of backend. It is adding what we've called inference pool. There is some non-trivial overlap with Service API, but there are also some very intentional differences. And one of the most critical differences for the sake of this discussion is that we intentionally want to avoid cluster IP routing and DNS names. The reason for that is that this whole model relies on being able to call out using an L7 extension to what we call an endpoint picker component that has all the special routing logic. And if you were to do cluster IP routing, it wouldn't be capable of doing that call out. And so people would think, oh, that this is no better than anything else, because it isn't. The only thing that is really unique about this is this extension concept, and that would be missed entirely by L4 routing. So that means that basically what we're describing is we want something that can be multi-cluster capable, but just as a reference point for gateway. So just so a route can point to a thing and understand, hey, this has endpoints that are in more than one location, in more than my local cluster. That's the problem statement. My working theory is we could reuse a model that was basically a tiny subset of multi-cluster service. And I wrote some really high-level scratch notes in that doc. I think I've linked it in the agenda. And so, yeah, hopefully that's sensible, but I would really appreciate some broader feedback here from the group. Like, is this the right direction? Is this something like, another thing I've thought about but haven't put in the doc, is there a version of multi-cluster service where the type of backend is configurable? Like, is there, you could point to, right now there's this very strict name mapping between service import, service export, and service, and like everything needs to match. And there's no real allowance for, like, hey, maybe there could be a different kind in here. At the same time, I don't know if service export, service import really makes sense, because we really don't want the full set of functionality that those offer. But there is some attractiveness. Like, I look at tooling like Submariner that exists, that I think is pretty broadly used at this point, that helps with a lot of the implementation details of, plumbing endpoints across clusters. And that could be useful here too. So I don't know if there's a way to make this more generic as we think about more kinds of backends in Kubernetes. In Gateway API, there's also been this discussion of a new backend type that I think, a proposal is calling endpoint selector or something like that. Presumably that could also benefit from some more generic thing somewhere. I don't know. Just thought starting a discussion could be useful. Open feedback.
Yeah, well, thanks. So I don't see any hands up, so so this is really timely, because Shane is going to follow up with talking about the AI Gateway Working Group proposal. So this helps provide the context as well for that. There are a number of things that come to mind. So I like the fact that you're following the sort of service export, service import model without necessarily having a full inference pool export object, just a annotation or something like that. But that makes sense. And I like the idea, but maybe it's too broad, right? Trying to generalize service export, service import to something export, something import, because that does well, really, there's two parts to all of this. There's the routing aspect, which would be specific to, well, for example, MCS has its own routing for services that are imported to a cluster. Gateway API has its own routing currently to things that are backed by a service import, and it would have its own routing for the inference gateway. But the syncing part, that could probably be generalized, because that's what everybody needs to do. MCS needs to sync service import across cluster sets. This would be inference pool import, and so. And it's also similar to kubebind, which we're discussing adding to SIG-MC as well, which is a project that's a bit like point-to-point KCP. Well, synchronizing objects across clusters. But anyway, that's my thoughts, just brainstorming. But Ryan, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, again, a timely discussion. I have two questions. One is, I don't actually recall if the Gateway API has a multi-cluster version. I think we had discussions about using service import as the backend for Gateway API, but that discussion, I remember way back there were actually some proposals, but I don't even remember if that one went through or not. So even Gateway
I'm gonna go dig it up, Robert.
Yeah, I think it's still labeled experimental. There's a handful of implementations, but it is not widely used, is what I would say. Like GK supports it, Envoy Gateway does, maybe Istio. I'm not sure. There's a handful. But
so
it's
that's kind of what I remember. So even Gateway API itself doesn't have an official multi-cluster version or things like that. And then for this one, I wonder, do we really need to try to bend like the existing MCS to fit to that, or we could just start something brand new, really just for this inference gateway? Is there any benefit of trying to retrofit into MCS? And
no, I mean,
initially was designed for the east-west traffic. If I understand correctly, this is mostly north-south traffic, right?
That's fair, and I think that what I'll say I've seen on anecdotal is that a lot of the gateway usage of multi-cluster doesn't really care about east-west, but it just happens to exist because that's how you do it with gateway right now, at least in GKE. And so we're adding some non-trivial amount of overhead to fulfill the requirements of multi-cluster service API when it may not be strictly required. I'm not sure. But certainly that's a non, what we're describing, or what I'm describing here for inference, is a very strict subset. Sorry, Corentin.
Well, yeah, no, I mean, there's another thing if you want to finish.
Oh, cool. Yeah, no, go ahead.
Yeah, there's two things I was thinking. One, it seems that there's a few SIGs that are dealing with gateways and multi-cluster, services. It sounds like LLMD is doing some stuff over there as well. I don't know if there'll be overlap or divergence, and if there's something we would want to get with them, especially for the AI part. And then there's SIG Network, I think, owns Gateway, not us. And then we have the MCS. So, and maybe that's the next topic on like, hey, do we need an actual thing that puts everything together? So that's that. The other thing I think that Stefan was touching on was there's the routing, but there's the service discovery. And I think what you're talking about properties is more about the service discovery. I mean, the routing would use it, but having those capability expressed in the service discovery, right? Or the endpoint discovery, rather. So maybe that could be something that detaches it, or MCS is the service discovery and gateway is the routing, and maybe that's how we see it. But it could be worth stabilizing and agreeing on what we're trying to solve. Or which
Yeah,
one
no,
we're trying to solve.
100%. I'll just really quickly say LMD is built on top of Gateway Inference Extension. and exists actually outside of Kubernetes, but there's a lot of overlap. I think there's a ton of people working on both. It has moved under the governance of SIG Network along with Gateway API. So we actually right now only have 2 SIGs, multi-cluster services still under SIG Multicluster. But yeah, maybe having some shared ownership could help here, but I don't know, that could also be a really huge topic. So I don't want to, I'm new to this area, so I don't want to, or to this SIG anyway, so I don't want to suggest anything too crazy, but yeah.
Also, just to maybe add yet another group that seems to be running in this, and I don't know the relationship to the SIGs because I don't participate there too much, is Envoy has their AI Gateway project. And the Envoy AI Gateway has both the concept of local routing, trying to find local inference services as well as out of cluster inference services. Yep. So routing to things. So I'm not sure if that's also yet another initiative or if that's covered by one of the SIGs currently.
Yeah, no, 100%. Envoy AI Gateway is awesome. They support this API. They also support Multicluster Service API. Well, they're built on top of Envoy Gateway, which supports Multicluster Service API, and combined with Gateway. So yeah, it's a lot of shared interest there. Yeah, so I think there are a lot of people that are interested in pushing this forward. I just wanted to, find the right group. At present, this discussion has primarily been happening under Gateway inference extension meetings. But if there are other meetings that would be better to it's hard to find, because this overlaps with so many different communities, it's hard to find the right home. But so far have been pretty focused on the inference extension, but open to ideas. I'm not sure who is next.
I think it was Arthur.
Okay. Hopefully you will hear me well with my connection, but so, well, I mean, to me, if you want to integrate as is with MCS API, or easily at least without us creating a new CRD and all of that, probably the best would be that inference pool extend a service instead of kind of replacing it or selecting endpoint, I would say, but I don't know how easily it would be for you.
Yeah, that was a really in-depth discussion as we were building this API out, and certainly something that was a popular idea. Ultimately, the reason that we chose to create a separate API, well, there are several, but I think, in my opinion, the most compelling one is that there's a lot of things in the service API that we simply did not want, and we thought would add significant confusion if combined with inference routing, right? An example being the cluster IP routing. If you send a request and you don't get any meaningful improvement because you're actually bypassing the entire path, you're bypassing the extension that has the improved routing logic.
And what if instead of a pod selector, you would have an endpoint selector or something like that?
An endpoint sidecar, is that what you're saying?
No, endpoint selector, sorry.
Yeah, that's actually, I mean, that is basically what this is. It's an endpoint selector, and it is a pointer to an extension that should handle routing.
But it's a pod selector or an endpoint selector?
It's a pod selector, I guess. I think I'm referring. I mean roughly the same thing in either case. But yeah, it selects pods, which should be interpreted as endpoints.
Because if you were selecting endpoint directly, I think today it would be possible for you to integrate with MCS API. Well, I mean,
well,
it would be the same basically, because we would import endpoint slice for you and select it.
So to clarify, you mean a selector that would target endpoint slice resources? Yeah, I'm not sure if.
Yeah, well, yeah, if you select endpoint slice, and yeah, if you select
It may just be.
endpoint slice and
Yeah,
we hit
no,
a
Arthur's
backing
totally
pod in the
breaking
cluster,
up a
but we have
bunch.
the endpoint slice. That makes sense.
Yeah, sorry, I missed a good chunk of what you're saying. Maybe we can follow up in chat or Slack or something. Yeah, my understanding of what you're saying, and I'm probably going to get this wrong, is that if this API allowed for selecting endpoint slices, then we could reuse a lot of the existing MCS infrastructure. And my concern would be that I would not want to require users to, create their own endpoint slices or find a way to do that. It generally, I actually am the one responsible for endpoint slice API, for better or worse, and I will be the first to say I never wanted anyone to have to fiddle with it themselves. I wanted it to be a hidden implementation detail, which maybe you deal with on the edge cases or in debugging, but hopefully not something you have to deal with every day. Ryan, I think you've got the next.
Yeah, thank you. I missed something, I think. Just want to clarify. Is the end goal to get an API or get an implementation?
This is that's a very good question. So we want this to be part of Gateway Inference Extension. So basically, we have inference pool, and we want to find a way to make it work across clusters, right? That's the goal. With that said, there's a lot of implementations. I think we already have 6 or 7. I don't know. There's a fair number of implementations of this API, and I would love if we could rely on some kind of shared plumbing. So I mentioned Submariner, like that's a tool that a lot of Envoy and a lot of gateway implementations rely on for multi-cluster. Really cool if shared tooling like that existed, so that we're not reinventing the wheel too much. But maybe that results, maybe that leans into the idea that we should have a similar looking API, or maybe an API that we can reuse across use cases. I'm not sure, but open to
So
ideas.
one thing, I'm a little bit confused. So do we actually have a gateway inference API now? You said there are already implementations. So the API is already there, and we're trying to see if we can get more common high level
There's
idea, implementation idea.
To clarify, the API is already there and it works within a single cluster. This discussion is how we can make it work across more than one cluster.
Sure, but Marina is a multi-cluster solution already, right? So they are already implementing multi-cluster version of this API.
Who is? Sorry.
Submariner. The
Oh,
one that you
no.
mentioned.
Sorry. What I meant to clarify there is that that is a tool that many gateway implementations rely on for their multi-cluster service support.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But there's no corresponding multi-cluster concept for inference pool yet.
Okay. Oh, so if I understand correctly, the API is there, but the API is for single cluster.
Correct.
We want to extend that to a multi-cluster. Do you think there's any need for extend the API, or it's just implementation? To move this single cluster API to multi-cluster API, do you think there's any need or any chance we actually need to change the API, or it's just a pure implementation change?
Right. So I think, so the proposal I have is we could add basically an export field to inference pool API or an annotation. I think annotation has been the more popular starting point. And then create an inference pool import resource. And that would feel very, very similar and familiar for anyone who had been used to using multi-cluster service. But I'm open to other approaches here.
I see. Okay, thank you. Thank you for clarification.
Cool. Well, I'm on Slack. I don't want to take too much time here. Feel free to drop comments on the doc. There's gateway inference extension meetings every week on Thursdays at, well, basically this time, 2 minutes from now, but on Thursdays. And so we'll definitely be primarily continuing the conversation there, but I'll try and pop into these meetings as well to give status updates. And, I would really, really value feedback from this group as we go.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, so yeah, I agree definitely. This sounds interesting. So regarding the questions about ownership and whatnot, I don't think that's particularly important, honestly. But I do think it's useful if we keep up to speed with what we're all doing in this area, because there is there are common areas, maybe stuff that we're trying to fix now with MCS that you'd want to avoid with inference pool imports and whatnot. And the whole idea of finding something general resonates with me. I tend to follow the rule that you do something once, you do it twice, and that gives you a decent idea of what you actually want to do generally. So we've got MCS, we've got inference pool. Maybe that'll give us some useful information. Okay, well, thanks again. So the next topic is Shane about the AI Gateway Working Group proposal.
Yeah,
and feel free to share your screen if you want to.
Sure. Let me do that. All right. If I can find it. Is that working? Cool. So yeah, a little bit of background first. So I've been working with Rob and others on the GIE for some time, and I helped develop LLMD, the networking parts of LLMD, which again, to Rob's point, uses the Gateway API inference extension under the hood. It uses the machinery and the APIs. And one of the things that was kept coming up for me this year was that the routing part of like intelligently routing, making good routing, final routing decisions for LLMs based on things like KV cache awareness and things like that is powerful. But the part of the equation we hadn't really gotten into yet was stuff that I would call like closer to the gateway or the HTTP route, as opposed to like inference pool, which is closer to like the server and like the final routing decision. So things like filters, policies, things that would affect routing at a higher level, like semantic routing, which is this concept that you can understand semantically what the meaning of like a prompt is and then make a decision about which model it should go to. Like these things kind of exist more, I'll say, closer to like the gateway and the route as opposed to closer to like VLM and the service. And we hadn't really gotten into those yet. But then I found a lot of people throughout SIG network, particularly, who were also interested in this, and we've, for better or worse, and I think it might be for worse, but everybody understands the name. We've called it AI Gateway. So AI Gateway in this context is meant to describe those things that are, we'll say, closer to the route, closer to the gateway, as opposed to like the service level and beyond, which is where the GIA currently operates. And so the idea was, well, we need to go and explore those features. They keep coming up. We actually on the GIE repository have a couple of issues where there's been discussions about these kinds of features, but it's grand enough, and its scope is such that it might be worth a working group. So we shopped that around and found a lot of people that were interested in kind of building a working group for this. So I won't go too deep into the proposal necessarily and try to like cover it because that'll take a lot of time, but please take a look at the proposal. But I will kind of highlight some of the features. Like, so these are some of the features that we're looking at as like exemplary of what we think we want to take a look at and see if we want to define standards for in Kubernetes. Prompt guards, token rate limiting. You've probably heard of semantic caching. If not, it's just the idea that you can like, it's caching. We can go into more details if people have questions. Semantic routing, response risk, taking care of different failure modes for these kinds of things. And then we recently added the observability bit. So having observability for these kinds of things. So this is the general idea of like where we think we want to try to investigate with this working group and see if there needs to be standards and APIs for this. So the goals are here. We want to investigate these use cases, look at the prior art like gateway API inference extension, make sure things are composable. As far as like how we actually do things, like how things actually move forward from this working group, everything should be a proposal. Those proposals may go to SIGs other than SIG network, depending on what the thing is. For instance, SIG storage has been engaged because with things that have the word semantic in them, they tend to need a vector database. And so that is a little bit more under their jurisdiction than it would be under networking. And it's kind of an interesting use case, et cetera, et cetera. They also may go to specific things. So like making proposals to the gateway API inference extension to change its scope is in scope for this working group. Potentially creating new sub-projects if we deem that necessary is in scope. But the main thing is to evaluate the space of AI gateway, again, for better or worse with the naming, and kind of see what shakes out and where things should go. So yeah, that's where we're at with it. There's a PR open for it. Oh, sorry, I almost forgot the most important thing. The most important thing is actually probably goal number 4. One of the things we noticed in gateway API inference extension and like talked about at some length was that the use case was not, what's the right way to phrase it? There's people like we have been trying in the gateway API inference extension to like keep an open arm extended to other proxies, for instance, like Nginx and stuff like that to come in. But so far we've had difficulty in like kind of bringing in more organizations from more disparate parts of like different kinds of technologies and stuff like that, different kinds of technologies and pulling them in. So like right now we're very heavily focused on Envoy, but we'd like for like Nginx, OpenResty and things like this to join the table. We do now have more proxy variety with Agent Gateway. Actually, I think that's a recent thing that's like just happening now. So we're on the right track, but this working group, a big part of it is like trying to see if we can pull more of the community in to make sure that we have a more coherent story, to make sure they feel more invited to the table and like the things that they're trying to do are better represented. So ideally it lands in this more complete story for inference, all things considered. That's a big part of it. So I've said a lot in one breath, so I'll kind of let it go for a second and see if there are any questions. But oh, sorry, the most important thing. Why am I here? So we were talking like the steering committee was like, I mean, yeah, you can probably go ahead and do this working group with just like sponsorship of just SIG network. I mean, it's very networking focused. So they seem open to that, but they suggested to us we should keep asking, keep looking around, and we have been. And like everybody who signed up, there's like 5 or 6 people who said, you know, like who signed up to be leads that are like, we really should have SIG multi-cluster in the mix. It often overlaps with networking naturally. So that's kind of why we're here. So I talked with Steven about it and we decided we put up a topic for it and kind of say, hey, here's this working group proposal. I think we're open to there being like multi-cluster goals. So if this was something that people in SIG multi-cluster felt energized about and wanted to say like, hey, I want to join that working group, but I have some specific things that I want to work on that are multi-cluster oriented, we would invite that. And then, yeah, so just wanted to open that up for discussion today.
Just to clarify, multi-cluster implementation of inference pool has been in scope for inference extension for, you know, a while now. What kinds of multi-cluster things beyond that do you think would be in scope for this working group? Because I'm assuming
I could fathom some. What's that?
Sorry,
go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I'm assuming inference pool itself as multi-cluster would not be in scope for this working group. So yeah, I'm just trying to understand what.
Yeah, if there's no questions about inference pool itself, like if there's nothing there to discover, it's just like everybody agrees, then yeah, it wouldn't. I could fathom some ways in which we could do that, but I kind of want to see what the experts that are doing multi-cluster think. I kind of would like to hear everybody else's opinion on that.
Laura, you were up first.
Okay. Yeah, I think Rob kind of motivated this a little bit more before too, but can you maybe talk a little bit more about, so I would say like Rob motivated about like needing to like use multi-cluster in an environment where you have like limited capacity for like the types of GPUs that you need, et cetera. Is that in general like what you're observing, like the multi-cluster deployment like motivation is for these types of like AI deployments? And is that like probably like, is that the main driver, I guess, that like drives people to like disperse their models across like multiple clusters? Or is that not? Yeah, I guess that's kind of like my question.
No, I think that
in your
resonates. Yeah.
experience.
Yeah, that resonates with me. That, of course, like I said, I am kind of coming to this from like a, hey, what do you all see? You know, what does SIG multi-cluster see as being important here? But yes, what you said resonates with me. The one interesting use case that we talked about briefly here was the egress use case. Somebody brought it up a little while ago. That one, I think is it's going to be part of the focus here, and I don't know if it has a multi-cluster story or not. I'm not sure yet.
What egress? So I'm just recalling some of the egress gateway APIs.
Yeah, we were talking about the Envoy AI gateway.
Oh, yes. Okay.
And it has an egress option basically to be able to go to, you want to send it off to, what do you call them? Like Bedrock or just OpenAI, you know?
Yeah,
stuff like that.
any like SaaS AI stuff. Yeah, so more similar to like the mesh egress use case then.
Sure, yeah. And so that use case, I don't know if that one falls anywhere in the multi-cluster kind of Venn diagram overlap, but I think that I'm trying to, so for instance, like it's been a while, but I think it's been a little while. I apologize for that. But I think the last time I was on here, I think we were talking about multi-cluster ingress gateways. And I know we have MCS, which is related, but basically having gateways that do ingress across multiple clusters. And I could fathom some use for wanting to have like multi-cluster ingress gateways that have semantic routing that might change the actual cluster in which you would route traffic to based on a semantic routing extension, stuff like that. That's the kind of thing I see more for multi-cluster that might be relevant. But I have not, and I just want to be clear, I'm not coming to this with like, I have all the use cases and all the user stories figured out. I'm hoping to see if you have them and then go from there.
Yeah, I think there's like in a most basic sense, like we have like I think regardless of like what the reason is, like many of the reasons that multi-cluster deployments exist at all, just because like they grew up that way, or because things need to be in different regions for regulatory purposes, or because of data gravity or whatever, all of those still apply. Some of them even stronger to like a large model situation, because things can be difficult to move around. So I think that's definitely like in scope of like the concerns and like the users that are represented in SIG multi-cluster. So I think you'll get some fertile like conversation about that. I think also most directly, since MCS like is a like API in use that like even like I mean, we talked about how it's still limited, but there's overlap in multi-cluster gateway implementations. I think that's like some prior art that we can comment on. And I think like even for specifically some of these like key properties you're talking about, like the semantic routing or like this the semantic caching, like the jump between MCS, which is like these services have the same name, to this prompt is in the same vector space as this other prompt is like kind of far jump. And so I think like working together to figure out like where we can connect those two components is definitely like in scope of SIG multi-cluster to support. So yeah, those are my initial thoughts.
Yeah, very cool. Thank you for your thoughts.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Thank you, Laura. Yeah, so first thing I want to echo what Laura says. From my experience, inference multi-cluster is pretty much a must. There's no way for any production inference service to sit on single cluster. It just doesn't work. So that part I think is very clear. What I'm not too clear about are two things. One is its same question is, what's the end goal of this working group? I don't fully know the ins and outs of like the SIG works. Like creating a working group, what normally is it normally around an API, or it's so what does this working group is supposed to produce? Is that an API, a set of APIs, or a set of implementations? That's my second question. The third question is, I'm pretty confused between this inference gateway and this one. They don't overlap. Sounds like a lot of similarity there, and especially for the end user case that I have a lot of inference workload there or services there. And they may be the same model, maybe different models. So I just want to route to the best one, maybe based on whatever routing criteria. Maybe it's based just want to find that one, and you put a lot of other things. So what's the relation between these two? I understand the inference gateway is more like API, and this is more like a working group. Yeah, I'm just not too clear about the
You mean the Gateway API inference extension, just so I'm clear?
Yeah, what Rob just mentioned.
So to your first question, deliverables, we are saying that definitions are potentially in scope, so defining things, because God forbid everything just be called AI Gateway. And then ultimately creating a space to collaborate to see if there's strong consensus, and then producing proposals. And those proposals may in fact go into the Gateway API inference extension. So the idea is that this working group is compatible with the Gateway API inference extension. It may drive things there. In fact, one of the maintainers of the Gateway API inference extension is one of the leads for the working group. The reason why it's a working group is because we had to go out of what had been the scope so far, and we needed to pull in other people. There's a lot of implementations out there doing AI Gateway, that like the Gateway API inference extension being more focused on like the optimized routing for a in-cluster use case, and not having things like, for instance, the egress use case even in scope, weren't really coming to the table for. So giving them a voice here and giving them some agency and kind of where we go for the future to support their use cases was part of the goal. So this is, the two are compatible, though it doesn't mean everything that this working group will naturally go into the Gateway API inference extension. Personally, I think a lot of it going there would be fine, but I don't want to worry about that yet. I want to worry more about letting everybody get together and say, what are the important things for the Kubernetes users that they need? And then figure out where they need to go.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think I probably spend more time on the inference extension side. Shane and I are both maintainers of Gateway API, so there's a whole lot of overlap here. But with that said, I think that what Shane pointed out is Gateway inference extension has, I think, P0, P1, highest priority is make it as easy as possible to efficiently route to LLMs running inside Kubernetes. And historically, the world of AI gateways has been focused on routing to managed LLM providers, generally outside of Kubernetes. There's a lot of generalizations there that, you know, that there are exceptions to everything. But like if you think of that, the inference extension being very focused on inside Kubernetes and AI gateway being focused primarily on going out of Kubernetes, that seems like an okay distinction to me. I think your usage of inference gateway is very sensible. That's actually what we have in our docs a lot of places, because the project name is awful to repeat over and over and over again. What we've defined inference gateway as is a gateway that happens to support inference extension. That's it, right? And so inference gateway has a much clearer roll off the tongue. We initially had a name for the project that was similar to that, but that got confusing because, well, the project is not an implementation, it's just an API. So I think there's room for both to coexist. I would also point out what Shane said, that, you know, this working group is just for proposals, right? So the proposals will go somewhere. Where they go could be any number of places, but the working group itself can't actually own an API. So hopefully that helps.
Yeah, we're trying to make this a very clearly in like the original definition of a working group. So to add just a little bit of a finer point on that, because Rob and I talked about this at some length, we do have what we hope is pretty clear exit criteria, and we want to exit. Like we do not want this to be a very long running working group. Actually, you could, if for some reason this ends up spinning off and creating a few proposals that just set the stage for a future of then, you know, okay, this set the stage. Now we see the precedent. We know where to go from here. We don't have any ground that isn't covered, at least at some level. The working group should close. Like the working group should not just stay open indefinitely. We don't want it to. So in terms of like multi-cluster, and if you decide that you feel like this is a place that you want to join in, we're hoping that the commitment will be like a year. I don't want to say that like definitively, but I'm personally really hoping that we can get to the point where we're like, okay, we've got all that groundwork and we've got our exit criteria done by next summer. And then people just, you know, have what they need to do AI gateways on Kubernetes and can start working on the implementations and the sub projects thereafter, that, you know, Gateway API, MCS, wherever the stuff exists, just, you know, grow it from there.
Ryan, put your hand up.
Go ahead, Ryan.
Just to clarify one thing. So, for example, if I'm very interested in this whatever name is, AI gateway or inference gateway, where should I go? Should I go to this working group to work on this, or should I go to the one that Rob mentioned, or I go to both?
I think maybe both. It kind of depends. If you just want the inference pool, like the multi-cluster story for inference pool, you would just go to the Gateway API inference extension, because like Rob said, that's kind of been a defined track. If you're actually interested in like check out the proposal, like read it in depth. If you're interested in some of the other features that are going on there, and you're interested in like what other multi-cluster use cases we haven't. So basically that is a defined multi-cluster use case. This working group is probably not going to really touch on that because it's defined. Go focus there if that's the use case. If you have other use cases that you can think of or that other people come up with, you're like, actually, that makes sense. The working group would probably be a decent place to do that, assuming that the SIG wants to ultimately sponsor the working group.
I see. Okay. Yeah, I'm mostly coming from the like customer end user point of view, that we want to create a service that can serve our customers, which will have all those questions you listed in the working group, like basically do whatever makes their inference more efficient, right? More useful. So
Yeah.
routing is one thing, and all the other semantics, caching, semantic, routing, or other stuff, token limit, all these things, they are all practical problems that we need to solve for them. So from my standpoint, basically, we want to have a understanding or give inputs on all of those. But if I understand correctly, for the more specific inference gateway one, I will go to the network SIG meeting, and then for the rest, go to this working group.
Yep.
Something like that. Okay.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's
Yeah, I mean, I think I would say most things focused on optimizations within a Kubernetes cluster. I don't know. We're still working on the dividing lines, but the clearest one to me is anything that is pointing outside of a cluster, I think is very clearly an AI gateway scope, or seems to be. But even that's just a working group, so the proposals probably still end up coming. I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out.
Yeah, it's all up in the air because we have to do the working group to actually tease through these things. But if I was just going to throw something out there, I would say I really hope we don't end up actually like we have a definition of AI gateway, but we don't have necessarily a AI gateway API. I would love to think that where we end up with is the GIE as it exists currently just gets enhanced by this, because like basically can just absorb the functionality that gets proposed naturally. Like you take, for instance, LMD, because I worked on LMD, so I have that frame of reference. Take LMD, which can do, you know, really high really good routing, rather really like sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here. Can do the advanced routing techniques that you need for that final LLM hop, and then just in front of it be able to add things like token rate limiting, you know, like a policy or something like that. It almost becomes non-AI at that point. It's just like API management. And you can kind of use it in any use case, whether it's egress or the in-cluster. And then if GIE ends up having the multi-cluster case, ideally, you just be able to sprinkle some of these filters, policies, and stuff like that on top of that gateway. And it's like, then it works in a multi-cluster context. I don't know exactly where it'll all end up, but I imagine we're going to get basically like free help for the existing use case, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does to me. So referring back to the generalization angle that we mentioned earlier as well, and John in the comments there says, sounds like it becomes a more general L7 engine that way. And I guess there's some of that. Also, perhaps on the GIE side of things, is it, well, you know, Rob, you mentioned that there's a fairly specific in-cluster focus for the time being. But I'm sort of wondering if all of this, having policies and so on, like the working group is planning to discuss, that's something that should be in front of the gateway in general, whether the query ends up going to a cache or to the local cluster or to a remote cluster or to a SaaS. Ultimately, I suspect having something common in front instead of a multiplicity of different solutions. But anyway, that's getting into working group discussions. So, Shane, what next steps are you looking for? People, well, I imagine interested individuals should respond to the thread on SIG Network, on the SIG Network mailing list. And then
actually, at this point, it would be on the dev mailing list.
Or the dev mailing list,
kind of moved to the dev mailing list.
Yeah.
So go to the dev mailing list, see the proposal, +1 it would be appreciated, but certainly +1 it with some context. Like, hey, I'm coming from a multi-cluster perspective. I'm interested in this. And then ultimately decide, and I can come back and we can talk more about if you decide as a SIG that you'd like to sponsor it and have representation in terms of goals and stuff. Pick some specific goals that you'd like to have represented there. Again, not including the already kind of well-known one of like the GIE's goal of having like multi-cluster inference pools, but any other new ones that you come up with, and we can talk about putting those in scope. I think that is the next step, basically, is like just say, here's what I want to do, or not. Like if you all decide ultimately that you do not want to do that, that's fine too, but I figured it would be remiss not to bring it up in this SIG since we always have that strong overlap between multi-cluster networking.
Okay, thank you very much. Just adding that to the notes. And in the last 3 minutes, we've just got 3 quick topics. So Arthur drafted a proposal to add CRD version labels to the MCS CRDs. And so I was curious if anybody's aware of other CRDs doing something like that. And so I had Gateway API in mind, so it's just as well, Rob, you're there. And Mike, you'd probably know too.
Yeah, I was gonna poke Rob and Shane.
But yeah, so please take a look at the PR and discuss there rather than trying to figure it out just now. And then just 2 notes. So the support for cluster inventory API has been merged in cluster runtime. And then another one that's been ongoing for a while in SIG-MC is the cluster profile pluggable credentials KEP. And I merged that earlier today. So thanks everybody for your work on all of that and all the discussions. And that was the end of the agenda. So if nobody has any other comments.
Actually,
yeah,
just an ignorant question. My apologies, just because I don't recognize the design, but the add the label to CRD version. Why do that rather than versioning the version in the CRD, like V1 alpha, V1 beta, etc.?
I think this may have started with Gateway API. And the reason we did that is to try and approximate what happens in upstream Kubernetes, where, you know, an API may sit as V1 for a while, such as service, for example, and we keep on adding new fields, and those new fields appear in minor versions of Kubernetes. Trying to approximate that with CRDs is a little difficult because they're not tied to Kubernetes releases. So just trying to attach, hey, this CRD came from this minor release of this project. That's all.
Okay, very cool. Thank you. Yeah, the new pattern for me. I might use it in some of my internal stuff, so thank you.
Yeah, it's all because you're always allowed to add stuff to objects without changing their version. So add a little clarity there. Nice
minimum version to support the CRD kind of annotation or label. So
something like that, yeah. Yeah, on either side. So the provider says, here's what I support, and the consumer says, here's what I need, or can adapt to whatever the provider is giving.
Thank you all.
Right. Well, thanks everybody for the interesting discussions, and I'll see you next time. Have a good rest of the week.
Cheers,
Thank you.